I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think BMW might actually be onto a winner with this thing, because it'll do this. And it shifts up as quick as this. Yes, unlike its predecessor, this now has a DCT or dual clutch transmission. Unfortunately though, we do have less power. We've got 300 horsepower and 400 newton meters of torque from this turbocharged inline 4-cylinder engine. So does that mean being slightly slower completely ruins this car, or is it actually a little bit better? They have done quite a few things to the chassis of this thing over the previous F40 generation, so I guess let's get it on the road and see how it handles. But not only that, we are going to do a 0 to 60, a 30 to 70, see what MPG this thing will really do. Will it do its claimed figure? And of course, we are going to see how fun this thing is to drive, because my name's Tom and you are watching Paragon Cars. Let's get into it. First things first then, this is obviously a all-wheel drive car, so the 0 to 60 is going to be great. But what about that mid-range punch? What about the 30 to 70? What's it going to do? Well, there's only one way to find out. Let's do it. So 30 to 70 then, we did 4.53 seconds, which is pretty good, but it's certainly not the best time for a hot hatch. For comparison, a VW Golf R will do about 4.15 seconds, and a Mercedes A35 AMG will do 4.45 seconds. Nevertheless, it's still quick enough. Now then, sporty road driving. This is where the N in the M135 comes into play. Firstly, how do we get into our sports mode? Well, it's a bit different. There's no longer just like one button, you're in sports. You have to go to My Modes now. You start off in personal, you have sport, which we are going to go into now, efficient, expressive and relax, and digital art, and silent, and that's your lot. No, not that many then, eh? It's absolutely ridiculous. Why they did that, I don't know. You can configure sport mode as well, because you have adaptive steering, a adaptive throttle pedal in terms of response. This one doesn't have the adaptive dampers, but the passive dampers are pretty nice. And you can choose whether you want the traction control to go on or off. And obviously, I want it off. And you also get quite a bit of fake noise. Coming into corners though, you feel that front end bite. This is where BMW have really changed their car, because they have changed basically the entire front end of this thing, which means you get a lot more turn-in when you turn into a corner. If you don't understand what I mean, it means the car feels like it wants to turn into the corner rather than just go straight on. And it makes this car feel so nimble in the corners. If I want to go there, I can go there. If I want to go there, I can go there. It goes exactly where I tell it to go. And that's exactly what you want. And the brakes, over 380mm discs on this thing, they are stonking. Now, the steering wheel is slightly too thick, I will say that, but there's definitely a little bit of movement going on when it comes to just getting into a corner. You can feel the rear end kind of twist round you. The front just keeps digging in. It never seems to understeer this thing, unlike an Audi S3. And it's not relying on that clever rear diff that the Golf R has. It's just a balanced car. It's inherently balanced. And that's where this car sets itself apart compared to the Golf R and the S3. Because the Golf R, it will kind of want to push wide. It's a great car, but it does kind of want to push wide a bit. So it relies on that rear diff to send power to the rear outside wheel to push you around that corner. Whereas this, it just wants to oversteer everywhere, which is so much fun. That's what a hot hatch should be about. And the gearbox, oh, it's so much better. I press a paddle and it gives me a gear. There's no more of that pressing a paddle and knowing that you've got to wait a little bit of time before this car finally gives you the gear that you want. And if that's not rapid enough for you, I'm sorry, but you're just chasing figures at that point. This car is easily rapid enough. And it's all those things in the chassis that I think a lot of people should really focus on more than headline figures. Something like my 140i, yes, I prefer the engine, and yes, I prefer the fact that it's rear-wheel drive and can do big skids. But to take it to a track day, I feel obligated to upgrade parts of that car because they're not up to the standard that the engine is and that the drivetrain is. Whereas this, every horsepower and every newton metre of torque coming out of that engine can be harnessed by the chassis of this car. You don't need to do anything to this before you take it to a track or you take it on a B-road blast. It's just ready to go. In fact, you could just remap the engine and just get more power out of this thing. There's no reason you shouldn't do that. Before we get on the motorway then, quick look at the interior because I'm actually really impressed with this car. So first things first, the screens actually look really nice. They're very high definition. The only negative for me is that the design is interesting. But for me, the rest of the interior is great. Everything is nice and high quality. All the materials are squidgy where you expect them to be. There's only a little bit of plastic down here, but like it's the same in every car, come on. Then you've got some nice textured materials here. Dash is nice and squidgy. You've got some M colour accents stitched onto the dash. And there's even little things like this lit up Harman Kardon logo. It's all those little touches that make a difference for me. And finally, massive shout out to the seats. These are some of the most comfortable compact car seats I've ever sat in. The bolstering is fantastic, they keep you in place, but they're also not overly bolstered so they don't dig into your sides when you're just driving along normally. Rear legroom is also just about passable for this class of car. It's certainly better than the rear-wheel drive F20 generation. And so is the headroom. Now then, coming onto the motorway, this is where a lot of smaller hot hatches can actually feel a little bit lackluster because they feel like they lack torque. However, this one really doesn't. Also, dual clutch gearbox, downshifts very quickly, so you get up to 70 miles an hour, blisteringly fast in this thing. Then you get your cruise control on. The suspension kind of settles a bit, but it never fully settles, unfortunately. It's nowhere near as bad as my M140i though. My M140i pogos all over the place. This is kind of just always a little bit edgy, but I don't mind that because again, it's a hot hatch. But don't be fooled into thinking that makes this an uncomfortable and unpleasant car to travel in, because it's absolutely not. As I said in the beginning, the seats are amazing. But the one thing that is really amazing is the sound deadening in this thing. Now, one thing I will say is that you can definitely hear a tiny bit of wind noise coming from these M Sport style wing mirrors, but the actual noise level inside the cabin is 71 decibels. Now, if you haven't watched the channel before, you won't know that 71 decibels is an immensely impressive figure. I don't know how BMW have managed it. Maybe it's the tyres, maybe it's just the shape of this thing. It is very egg-like, I suppose, which makes it very aerodynamic. But this is quieter inside than the Audi A3, which did 71.5 decibels. And not only that, it's quieter inside than a previous generation BMW 3 Series, a class of car completely above this one. And you know what? I think a lot of that is actually down to the size of the wheel, because this is on the slightly smaller wheels compared to most of the 3 Series that I've driven. And then the sound system, it's still the Harman Kardon setup, so it's pretty much the same as you got in the previous generation, even the F20 1 Series. It sounds pretty much exactly the same to me. Nice thumpy bass, pretty good mids, but it lacks a little bit in the highs. Overall though, it's a great sound system, especially for this class of car. Anyway, now it is time to see what this car does 0 to 60. It's claimed to do it in 4.9 seconds, which is actually slower than the previous generation car. But to me, this feels a little bit quicker, you know, and I think it's because of that dual clutch gearbox. But anyway, let's see what she does.
BMW, you absolute liars. We just did a time of 4.56 seconds. That's nearly half a second quicker than the claimed time. Just goes to show that a dual clutch gearbox makes shifts, especially on the 0 to 60 sprint, much faster.
Then when it comes to town driving, this is where this car is actually really nice. So going over things like speed bumps like this, even though it's quite stiffly sprung, it feels accomplished in its nature. It doesn't just feel stiffly sprung, but the dampers don't match the springs. It feels like BMW have really cared about the way they've calibrated this car. And the other thing is, it feels kind of like a Mini, unsurprisingly. But you know what? That's actually quite a good thing, because it means when you come to things like car parks, you can actually get into spaces quite easily in this thing. And when it comes to parking, this car has a pretty neat trick up its sleeve. So if I press this button down here, my parking button, this is now going to look for parking spaces, and you're like, well, yeah, obviously, like loads of cars have had this auto park feature, but the newer system in these BMWs is actually genuinely quite good. So you literally come off the brake, the car finds a space a lot quicker than the older system did, and it's seen a space here. It's going to see this car in front of me as well. It's going to wait for him to go by. And it also tells you on the screen where you're going, which I quite like with this little line. And I have to do nothing. I literally press a button and I go, okay, I want to park. I don't have to drive past spaces. I don't have to wait for the car to find a space. It will just find one. It's realised it's completely cocked that up as well. So it's now... This is such a terrible demo of the system. I promise you it's a good system. Look, it's actually correcting itself. Look at that. There you go. And then it should put itself in park and we should be done. Look at that. That is, it's done a genuinely good job. Those are some faint lines and it's actually gotten me in between them. And obviously, as I said, being a small car, getting to the first notch on the door is a very easy thing indeed. So it's not the fastest hot hatch you can buy. Well, by a long shot actually, but it is one of the better handling ones you can buy. The steering is sharp, the engine is peppy, the damping is so good in this thing. They have worked wonders on this car, on the F70 version especially. It feels darty and fizzy like a hot hatch should. It's not purely relying on technology to get it to rotate round the corner. It is just a good chassis. And that also means that it's fantastic as a daily driver, because it's not relying on things like adaptive dampers to give you that stiff feeling. You feel connected to the road in this thing a lot more than you do in something like a Golf R and an Audi S3. And in my books, even though it's obviously not as quick as those cars, I think that makes it more of a hot hatch than those two cars are. So, if you're not one to necessarily chase figures and you just want to have a fun driving experience in something that can also be as practical as a front-wheel drive hot hatch can, then this is really quite a good answer. Anyway, massive thanks to Vines BMW for letting us borrow this car for the review today. They have been absolute legends. If you want to check out their website and their stock for sale, I'll put a link down in the description below. If you want to check out our website as well, there'll be a link for that as always. And of course, as always, my name has been Tom and you have been watching Paragon Cars. I'll see you guys on the next one. Cheers.